Hi, I'm Claire Mitchell, QC. Welcome to the Witches of Scotland podcast. I'm a lawyer who specialises in miscarriage of justice cases, and we're bringing you this podcast because we want to tell you about the women who were accused, prosecuted, convicted, and ultimately executed as witches in Scotland.
I'm Zoe Venditozzi, and I'm a writer who's always had an interest in the witches, and I feel that this dark mark against Scotland needs a reckoning.
The campaign Witches of Scotland wants three things. Firstly, a pardon for all those convicted of witchcraft. Secondly, an apology for all those who were accused as witches. And finally, a national monument in recognition of all those who are affected by this terrible miscarriage of justice.
Over the forthcoming weeks, we'll be talking to a whole host of experts about the history and the modern day connections to the Witches of Scotland.
Hello and welcome to Witches of Scotland podcast episode 10. We've got a great episode for you today. We've been speaking to Caren Thompson, artist and curator of the Medicine Spoon Memorial. If you want to find out more about the Medicine Spoon Memorial, which I'm absolutely sure you will do, then please do look up the Medicine Spoon Memorial on Instagram, as it's the best place for people to see the project. There is another website I should mention, or two websites I should mention. One is Caren's website called madeonthemoors.co.uk, and that is where people can check out information and get involved in the project that she's going to speak on. The other website that I think will definitely be of interest to people is www.loveisourpower.com. This is Callie White's website and the backstory to the Medicine Spoon project and ancestral healing comes into play and the importance of this healing work. So please do, when you finish the podcast, go and have a look in relation to Caren Thompson's website, madeonthemoors.co.uk, and Callie White's website, www.loveisourpower.com. So, Zoe, I understand that you've been doing some researches in relation to women who were accused as witches.
Yeah, carrying on with what we've been doing the last wee while, we've got a few different women who we've got some details for, just to remember, as we keep saying, them as individuals, as separate women who were living their lives when this thing happened to them. So the first person that we found this week is Maggie Osborne, and we've got very, very scant details on her. All we have is 1650, which was when she was executed, from Ayr, that she was female and that she was unmarried and that she was executed after a trial. That's literally all there is about Maggie Osborne.
Okay, well, we'll remember her. One person that I had a wee look at, Zoe, that there's really much more information, unfortunately, but it caught my eye. Firstly, because the person was just one name. There wasn't a surname. It was just Nicole. Just the one word Nicole was noted in the records. And her trial appears to have taken place in 1603. And interestingly, it was from the Shetland Islands, and it appears this trial has taken place there. She was unmarried. She went to trial, and the outcome of what happened to Nicole after her trial is not known. As you'll know, Zoe, one of our listeners who we'll speak about next week has got in contact, and she's currently researching a woman in Skye who was accused as a witch, and she sent us some great stuff. So I look forward to reading that this week and perhaps giving you a lot more information on that Skye woman next week.
Great. Okay, that'll be fascinating. I think it's really interesting that we've got so many people getting in touch with us, telling us about witches or women that were accused and possibly executed as witches across Scotland that they've come across in their own research.
Absolutely. Would encourage anybody, please, to do so, because we would be delighted to name as many women as we can and put as much detail into their background as possible. So please do get in contact. And we've got one final person to name today.
Yeah, we've got Jean Crawford, and we've got here the 26th of February 1650. That was the date of her execution. She was female and unmarried and executed. That's the extent of information about her as well. It's just so bare. The just fact that it just reduces a woman in her life and her family and everything that she did just down to these really bare facts. It's just so grim. It's horrible.
Even in the records, Zoe, as you'll know, sometimes you just come across it and it says some women.
God.
Then identifies 6 women were killed, and we just know them as some women. Or sometimes they're named only as the occupation of their husband, or that there's even less information. These people weren't even recorded as their name. So I think it's so powerful when we can discuss their name. And it shows really the power of the work that Caren's going to tell us about today.
There's one other woman that I want to talk about that I've been looking into a little bit more. There's more detail about this woman because, well, the obvious reasons why there's more detail about her. And she's somebody that is quite well known, well, really very well known as soon as you start to look into this, because she was the last woman to be charged and found guilty under the Witchcraft Act. And that, of course, is Helen Duncan. And the reason that I've looked into Helen Duncan this week is because it was the anniversary of her birth last week on the 25th of November. So she was born the 25th of November in 1897 in Callander in Perthshire. And as a young girl, as a teenager, she was known as Hellish Nell, which I have to say, as nicknames go, is pretty cool. I like that one now. But I'm sure it was not seen as a good thing at the time in her quite strict religious family. But she was known as that because she insisted that she was able to commune with the dead, even when she was quite young. And when she left school and she moved to Dundee, where she worked at the DRI apparently, and she got married, and she married a man called Henry Duncan, who was a survivor of the First World War, who'd been injured during the First World War. They lived together. They had 6 children, resulting out of 12 pregnancies, which just sounds horrific. And she worked the whole time. She worked apparently in a bleach factory. But alongside that work during the day, she also was a practicing medium who had a spirit guide who was called Peggy. And she travelled around. And during the Second World War, she apparently travelled all over the country. So during her mediumship career, she came to the attention of various bodies and people who were out to prove that this was, of course, just a big lie and it was fraudulent. And amongst them were the London Spiritualist Alliance, and eventually Harry Price, who I think there's been TV programmes made about Harry Price. He's probably the most famous sort of person. He was a ghost hunter, but I think was known as a ghost hunter, but also was known as somebody who went out to disprove people who were frauds. So there was lots of research done into Helen, and it really did seem that she was, to many people, that she was a fraud. And one of the things that she did was she'd bring out ectoplasm during readings. But it was discovered over time, and there are these fantastic photographs. If you Google Helen Duncan, loads of stuff comes up, and some of it is photographs that were taken during the readings that she did. And you can see that it looks like it's cheesecloth. It looks like she used to swallow it and then regurgitate it. And there was things like photographs of faces from magazines stuck onto these sort of bits of really gross cheesecloth. And there was things like egg white and things that were used as well. I don't know if that made it brighter in the dark or not. I'm not sure. But there was various times where she was caught out and shown to be sort of, at the very least, embroidering the experiences of the readings. Okay. So she basically went through her career, was tested in the 30s. And then in 1941, HMS Barham sunk off the coast of England. During the war, there was this necessity to keep things secret. And so it was only the families of the dead sailors that were informed. So around about that time after it happened, Helen was doing a reading and she mentioned that, and she said that she'd been contacted by somebody that had died on the ship. So lots of stuff happened after that. But basically, she was then accused of fraudulent witchcraft in London because they said, well, if she knew that, then basically she's a spy. And first of all, I think they treated it as treason, but ultimately they tried her under the Witchcraft Act. So she was convicted in 1944, despite the fact there was no physical evidence. It was all based on the evidence of witnesses. And I think that she went to jail for about 9 months. And at the time she said, I have done nothing. Is there no God? And Winston Churchill said that to try her under the Witchcraft Act was obsolete tomfoolery. And while I was researching this, there were a few people that were like, well, that's rich coming from somebody from the Order of the Druids. So I'm not sure. I'm not sure how true that is, that Churchill was a Druid. I don't know. I'm sure there'll be listeners that can tell us more about that. But when she was released from prison, she promised that she would hold no more seances, but she was arrested again during another seance in 1956. And she died shortly after. And there's some conspiracy theories that she died as a result of the police waking her up during a seance when she wasn't ready. But a lot of people insist that that's nonsense and that she didn't keep very well and she had problems with her heart and so on. And she was a big woman, and, you know, it was quite understandable that she would have died young-ish. I think she was in her early 60s when she died, maybe her late 50s. So after that happened, it still rumbles on because there are members of her family who have tried to appeal her conviction, but it's been turned down several times by the Scottish Parliament as recently as 2012.
Yes, because a few people have asked me and provided the example of Helen Duncan and say, but she was doing things fraudulently or she was a spy. How can you ask that she be pardoned? First of all, we're not asking that Helen Duncan be pardoned. Not that I don't think there are other good reasons for pardoning her, and I'll speak about those. But the aim of the Witches of Scotland campaign is to pardon those who were convicted under the Witchcraft Act of 1563. Now, the Witchcraft Act of 1653 ended in 1736. That was the Witchcraft Act which dealt with all the people during the periods of satanic panic fear over the course of those centuries. What happened to Helen Duncan was they essentially didn't know what to do with her down in England, and somebody realised that if she wasn't going to be prosecuted for treason, and the treason would have been being a spy, because the rationale was that the only reason she would have known is that she would be a spy. What I think is quite funny about that is that there was actually a campaign at the time about why you had to keep quiet about various things that had happened. And the campaign's title was, I think, Loose Lips Sink Ship.
Sink ship, yeah, absolutely.
Namely, people gossiping about what had happened meant that information could get to the enemy, and as a result, people's ships could go down. So I think that's quite funny that there was a campaign ongoing which effectively acknowledged that people talking about these things could allow other people to know about them.
But the thing as well, there was no evidence that she was a spy. I mean, I think common sense would say that even if they only told the sailors' families that died on the ship, there was about 900 people, I think. So if you think about maybe at least 10 family members, say, 8, 10, 12 family members per person, you're already talking about the best part of 10,000 people, and then that's going to spread out and people will tell about it because, somebody's died. You can't kind of hold that quiet. So I think more likely she just heard it on the grapevine and then added it to her shtick because it gave it a bit more, of an immediacy because it was during the Second World War. I think she was just making a buck.
Indeed. Well, there's two options, that either she was making a buck or in fact she did have contact with someone. She had whatever powers.
Yes, of course.
They are.
Because that's her family, I think, are still insisting that she had the power of being able to talk to the dead, and many people do really believe in that,
Sorry, Zoe, as you said, it's interesting that she was, inverted commas, caught out doing these things, the regurgitation and things like that. The question is that embroidery of something that's true, that she believes, and she's trying to dramatise that in order that people will believe her or be interested, or was it just fraud? But whatever way it does, she's certainly a name that we don't have to memorialise. Her name is very well remembered. I think anybody who is convicted of the Witchcraft Act should be pardoned under it because it makes no sense. What she was convicted of was pretended witchcraft, which was effectively fraud. It just seems a wee bit strange that if they could have shown that she was trying to defraud the people that she was speaking to by charging money for services that they thought were real, then that was the way that it should have gone down instead of the Witchcraft Act. But yeah, I would certainly privately, as it were, not as the campaign Witches of Scotland, support anybody who'd been convicted under the later Witchcraft Act, including Helen, even though there's at least the suspicion that what happened was that she just found out from somebody else and was repeating it. But the Witches of Scotland campaign is specifically in relation to those people that were caught up in those times in Scotland. And although Helen is our most famous person convicted of witchcraft, she was convicted down in England and not during the period we're talking about.
Okay, so moving back to what our campaign is then about the Witches of Scotland, we've got such an interesting guest for you this week who is talking about an art project that she's been involved with.
Yes, I'm delighted to be able to give you the conversation that we had with Caren Thompson. As I said at the start, she is involved in a project with medicine spoons, and I think possibly the very best way for us to tell you about that is simply to allow Caren to tell us in her own words.
Hi Caren, and welcome to the Witches of Scotland podcast.
Hi, thank you. It's lovely to be here. Thank you for inviting me.
No problem. We're really, really interested to find out about the work that you've been doing around the issue of witches. So I think I'd like to ask you first, can you tell our listeners what your project is all about?
Okay, so my project, it's an invitation really for women and men to creatively get involved in honouring and bringing to light the women who were persecuted as witches through the burning times, and doing that in a creative way. And people basically can pay a donation, which is £3, and that covers costs for like postage, and they receive a package. It's a remembrance package, and the package contains a fabric spoon. So it's a pre-loved piece of fabric, which I've hand printed medicine spoons on these pieces of fabric. And they'll receive this piece of fabric, but also they will receive a woman's name. And the woman's name is a woman who has been persecuted, and her names will be in trial records. So they'll open up this package and they'll see this spoon and they'll see a woman's name, and it's their way of sitting with this woman and honouring this woman, and they will adorn the piece of fabric with that woman's name. And then all the spoons will be collected together and then shown in an exhibition. So that's kind of the creative aspect of the memorial, but there's other layers to it as well.
It's such a great idea. And the spoons themselves, we'll put links up on the website, and there'll be links people can go and have a look at what's been done so far themselves too. But it's such a beautiful idea. And I'm wondering where it was that you got the idea from originally.
Well, it's basically a part of a bigger project. The Medicine Spoon Memorial is just a small part of a community of women who have gathered this year. We're called the Silver Spoon Collective, and we are going deeper and exploring the witch wound and what kind of inherited trauma we've experienced, or women have experienced. It's like a personal inner journey, basically. And I think there's 47 of us all together now, and we're all exploring this. So this is my part of it. There's women out there, and it's going to be part of an exhibition, which is going to be happening in 2021. And all the women that are involved are going to be bringing their creative aspect to it. So there's dance, poetry, spoken word, sculpture. It just goes on and on. So this is just a small part of it's a bigger thing. So it's very exciting, and I'm honoured to be a part of it.
Caren, are all these different things in relation to the women that were involved in witchcraft, or are the other parts of it involved in memorials to different women?
Well, basically it all stems from a woman who, her name is Callie White. She's an ancestral healer. She did a pilgrimage in 2019 and gathered women together to explore the burning times and what kind of an effect that's had on women. And I can remember listening to a podcast that you've done and the history of the burning times. And it's like, it's not long ago. You know, it's like in our education system, it's not a part of our culture to look back and be like, this is what happened to thousands of women. And so I was lucky enough to be part of this workshop, and we explored this and what an effect it's had on us personally and as a collective, and also in our culture. And we're all exploring that, and we're trying to heal. And it's a healing process, basically. It's a healing process that we're all delving into, and this is my part of it.
What you're really, really researching, or what you're really exploring in what you're doing, is the effect of what happened societally to these women, the fact that these women were plucked from their lives, they were obliterated from society. But it's not only the effect on the people that died, but the effect of women in society as a whole, how other women would behave as a result of the fear of what happened to the women that were killed.
And I think the biggest thing from going to Callie's workshop was basically the smashing up of our sisterhood. These women were tortured and then basically had to grass up their mates. You know, they had to tell on their family members, you know, under these horrendous conditions, had to tell my neighbour, yeah, she's a witch, you know, and it was like, yeah, she's a witch and she's a witch. That has so much power. That's like, you know, it's like, it's an inner journey for myself about reconnecting the sisterhood that we've lost. I am speaking for myself, but I don't feel like I have that sisterhood, that really strong sisterhood, without judgment, without, you know, feeling like someone's going to do wrong. I I think we underestimate what an effect that's had on our culture and for women. And I think women turn against one another. So it's healing that. And it's like the work that we're doing as a collective, we're rebuilding that support. We're saying as women, we need to gather and we need to look after one another and support one another and lift ourselves up without judgment, you know?
Yeah, definitely. I'm wondering why it was that you chose spoons.
Yes, spoons. So basically, I've borrowed that symbol. Callie White, I'll give you the details of Callie's website so you can go deeper into that. The workshop that she provided to us, she asked us to bring to the ceremony, it was a silver spoon. And this silver spoon represented medicine. It was like a healing symbol. It was like, you know, we have an opportunity to look at what's happened in our past and what's happened to our ancestors and heal from that. And so I've taken that symbol and I wanted to use that as a kind of symbol. So every woman's name that's on one of these pieces of fabric, it's like medicine for them. It's like saying, we witness you and we see you and we remember you. We remember you as a human being. You know, when it comes to the witches, it's like they are seen as like this mythical creature. You know, these were real women that were just trying to survive and trying to look after their family and feed themselves. And it really brings it home when people, you know, receive a piece of fabric and it has a woman's name on it. It could be just a person like us. We're all trying to survive, especially at the moment with what's going on. We look back and it's a great comfort for me to think, you know, our ancestors have gone through similar things that we're going through now in worse situations, you know, and it's like, it's a comfort to think that they've gone through this sort of stuff and we are too. And, you know, so yeah.
And can people still be a part of the project now?
Yeah. So, well, at the moment, all the Scottish women, because it's a UK project, so all the Scottish women have actually been assigned to women. In January, I'll be releasing the English, Welsh and Irish names. Right. People can get involved. The best way is to go to my Instagram account and then go to my website from there. And then they can get involved in January because I'm going to put my PayPal buttons up again and they can contact me that way. So all the Scottish women have actually gone, but my dream would be to actually come and do a tour of Scotland and be able to hold workshops for women to be able to gather and actually remember the women, because there's going to be some women that haven't been able to give me the spoons back for various reasons, because like the number I've got is like 2,719 women, and it's like all of those have gone out to various people and some of them aren't going to come back. So it'd be really lovely to be able to go back to Scotland, be on the land there and hold, you know, circles for people who want to come and design a spoon and honour a woman. That would be fantastic.
And you've travelled up to Scotland, obviously. You're mentioning there again. Why was it that you chose to start off with the Scottish witches? Well, I'm presuming, actually, maybe quite foolishly, that you're in England.
Well, it was a really practical thing, because are you aware of the database from Edinburgh?
Yes.
Yeah. And it was like, I was like, wow, like, I can't believe this exists. This is amazing. A database with all these women's names and their locations. It was just absolutely so fantastic. And I was like, well, this is the easy way to go about it. But then I was like looking at the numbers and I was like, wow, how many women? That's insane. And that's the whole thing about the project. It's like when I get all these spoons back, looking at the quantity of work that's gone into these spoons and also just how many there are, it's really insane. But yeah, it was a practical thing because it was all logged for me. So it was like, I'll start with the Scottish women. And also it's like, that's kind of where it started. That's where it began. And that's where the hysteria was. And it was like, it felt important to honour that. And I haven't actually travelled to Scotland much. And it's like now I've written out, when I send out my packages, I've actually handwritten every single woman's name on a piece of paper. And that was really powerful. It was like every woman's name, writing it down and sending it off. It's like, now feel this like energetic pull to actually come to Scotland and see the places where these women lived. I went to North Berwick quite recently, and it was so amazing just to be on that land and sort of, it was very powerful, very powerful. So I really would love to explore more in Scotland.
We look forward, if and when you're able to come up post-COVID, we look forward to trying to meet up with you.
That'd be so amazing. And also it's like with the spoons, I'm going to be putting them together. They're going to be shown like prayer flags. So I'm going to join them all together. And I would really love to show them in Scotland, just the Scottish women, because I think that that's really important to be like, these are the Scottish women. And I'd love for people to come and see them.
That'd be amazing.
It would be amazing. I wonder if we can try and work with you to try and find a venue for it and try and...
That'd be fantastic. I'd really love that. Definitely. Yeah.
What do you think to the idea of the memorial? We're keen. There's a lot of people pushing for this as well.
I'm absolutely so behind it. And this project started just at the beginning of COVID. And it was like an opportunity for me to like, right, I'm going to do this. I'm going to get this sorted. And I saw, your Instagram page. And obviously because of COVID, you weren't able maybe to do your work. And I was like, no. I was like, no, what are you doing?
We did. We started off, Caren, just on International Women's Day this year with no absolute clairvoyance at all, just before COVID struck. And we're like, hey, we've got this campaign. And then COVID struck. And we're like, oh, we have to shut that down.
And I was like, oh my God, it really brought a sort of reality to what I was doing. It was like, I'm doing this in sort of a creative sense, but you guys are doing in this like really real sense of actually, getting a pardon. I was blown away, and I was like, bloody COVID.
Well, it's not, it won't stop us.
I know, and I'm so happy that that's happening. And so when it comes to how I feel about a memorial, it's like, it definitely needs to happen. And it's like, I'm now looking to England, and I'm looking to Wales, and I'm looking to Ireland, and it's like, it needs to happen in every place. I've had people from different countries contact me. I've had someone from, I think it was Sweden, saying like, can you do Sweden? And I was like, oh my God. I've had people calling me from Canada and lots of people from all over the world saying that they've resonated with this. And and it's so important that this gets, recognized and validated. And I'm so behind what you're doing. It needs to come to fruition.
I can't wait to see the exhibition of all the work that's been done. I think this is such a brilliant idea to get people that are not necessarily artists, or, maybe they're kind of unofficial artists, or they're outside artists or whatever, all putting work together to do this. I think it's going to be really mind-blowing to see the 2,000 plus names and the spoons. But it'll be wonderful. I can't wait to see it.
It's like really amazing. Yeah. I have a PO box, and I go and pick up my post, and I have a collection of spoons every week, and they're just so beautiful. And I have messages from women that it's resonating with so many people, and the amount of effort that they're putting into this work, it's amazing.
I think that's what we feel too about the campaign, that so many people worldwide have contacted us. So many women across the world, and so many women in Scotland, they viscerally feel it. They actually feel the injustice, they feel the history of it, and they want something to change.
I think it's that, I listened to your podcast about some people might not see this as relevant, or why look back? Yeah. And it's kind of like, we need to look back at what has gone wrong. We need to sort of like own up to the wrongs that have happened and fix them and heal them to move forward. This is, I feel, been ignored for so long, and it needs to come forward. I just want to share with you that I grew up in a place called the Ribble Valley, which basically is really close to Pendle Hill. So it's had the hill. It was like part of my life. It was very sort of foreboding and very dark to have that in my life, and there was no sort of sympathy towards these women. It was more of a tourist, or it was like a silly story. I felt like it was a warning. It was a warning of for women to not standing their true power. It was a scare tactic to stay small. And I think that's still true today. It's kind of being called out as being a witch. It's just so for me, it has so much relevance. Yeah.
You were saying, Zoe, on an occasion before that the power of still calling someone a witch, or women feeling that they're being targeted, or even in social media and stuff like that, it has a very, very powerful effect. There's a modern resonance with this history.
For sure.
Yeah. And it's interesting what you were saying before about this idea that sisterhood maybe doesn't quite exist in the way that it could have done, and that women will name other women. I think that's a really interesting phenomenon on social media, about some women kind of playing to power. I don't know. I think it's interesting, and I keep seeing the word witch kind of bandied around in the modern construct. It's really weird. You'd think that would have been kind of put away now in the past, but and it's still very much what you're saying. It's a shutdown. It's a warning.
Yeah, if a woman is in her power, it's like easy to whip that out and say she's a witch. What is a witch? The way it's been used is as if it's a derogatory term, and it's like the women that were accused, in a sense, were healing women that had powers in knowing how to heal ourselves with herbs, and were midwives,
or they were just women that weren't doing anything like that at all. They were just powerless in some way, or they had land that somebody wanted, or it's just insane. Just anybody could. It must have felt like nobody was safe.
What I'm really, really pleased about, though, is what I see as the modern reclaiming of the term witch. I'm really, really pleased to see women coming forward and saying, yeah, I'm a witch. We've had already on someone who was a witch, and we were, remember, Zoe, you were actually quite nervous about saying, is it okay if we call you a witch?
Yeah. And I think really it's like, I don't know which one of you said this, but one of you said in your one of your podcasts was that I'm not a witch. And I was like, I kind of giggled a little bit inside, because I was like, you know what? As women, we are all because
that was me. I said, that was me, Caren. Claire here. I said, I'm not a witch. And then in the podcast where we had Alice Turbuck on, who is a modern day witch, I found out that, in fact, in my own home, I have an altar.
I think that's part of it, is the fact that I like to call witches women of the land, and it's about being connected to the land. And I think ultimately that's what we've been disconnected from. And I think all of us, even men as well, it's not just about women. It's like us sort of, owning this spiritual side of ourselves and saying it's all right to do what we want to do and believe in what we want to believe in. And it's like when you said that, I was kind of like, you're a woman, you're a witch. Like, we're all witches in our own way.
Well, we are all witches. I'll take that back. We are all witches.
Yeah.
Yoko Ono, in fact, has not one but two albums saying I'm a witch. But one of our very first people on our podcast, Mary Kidd, said the history of witchcraft in Scotland is the history of women. And I suppose to that extent, we are all witches.
And Claire did a kind of straw poll type of thing on Twitter saying to women, well, anybody, if you think that you would be held up as a witch now, kind of raise your hand. And there was hundreds of women who tweeted back and said,
I mean, that's why I feel like my project has resonated with so many women, is because I've worked as a doula, and, a woman supporting someone in birth, and it's, and, the amount of fear that I felt in that role, it was really quite intense. And the stories that I'm collecting from all the women that are working on the project is like, in today's society, they'd be like, I would be accused as a witch because I gather herbs, or I support a woman in labour, or, and I think that's why the momentum, I mean, because when I first started the project, I was like, I'm going to be doing these all myself. I really did. Okay, how many women? 2,719 women. Right, okay, so I'm going to be sat here. And it wasn't until sort of they started, like, the momentum of it was just amazing. It was so fantastic. And just the stories that are coming back to me about how it's resonating with people. It's it's really beautiful. So yeah, I'm honoured to be a part of it.
Thank you so much. I mean, when I saw that, I get in contact with you having seen some of your work on Instagram, and when I saw it, I thought it was so beautiful and so moving that modern women were taking the time and care to sit down and think of those women that had died or had been accused of witchcraft, been executed, and they had taken the time to physically memorialise that by decorating, sewing these spoons. I just thought it was a genuinely beautiful memorial, and thank you so much.
Yeah, thanks
for thinking of it.
Yeah, thank you so much.
Thanks so much for listening to episode 10 of Witches of Scotland. As ever, please do share the podcast with people. Please do rate us, because the more people that listen, the greater chance we have of success with the campaign.
We hope you join us for episode 11, when I'll be speaking more about the detail of the Witchcraft Act, and Zoe and I are going to be talking about the testimonies of women who were convicted as witches.
We'll also be talking to some European counterparts.
We look forward to you joining us then. If you'd like to learn more about the Witches of Scotland, please subscribe wherever you get your podcast. Sign up for our mailing list at www.witchesofscotland.com to keep updated with the campaign. On that site, you'll be able to find how to link with us on Twitter, Facebook and Instagram. Yeah, we look forward also to seeing you in episode... Seeing you?
No, you can't, unless you've got a special Hellish Nell. But then they'd have to be dead. I don't like the way this is going. No, listening, hearing, I don't know. Come back next week.